I mean, I'm just glad that like the Do Lab exists and that they're like paying attention to underground up and coming artists.
Hmm.
It's a pretty cool space to be involved in, like at the same time that you're watching like superstar acts.
Awesome. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Nice to meet you, I guess. Yeah, we haven't met before,
We have
right?
not met before. I'm Adam. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Awesome. So this is a podcast about you and your journey in music, and we'll talk about the new music you put out.
Cool. Let me know if you can hear him whining because he had surgery yesterday, so I'm keeping an eye on
Oh,
him.
yikes. Is he all right?
Yeah, he's good. No, he's just he gets a little whiny.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, cool. So I always start off, you're born and raised. Are you in Denver? Is that where you're originally from?
I actually grew up in St. Louis. Um,
Oh, okay.
yeah, and then I moved to CU.
I can't really even hear him, but
Okay.
it's fine. Yeah. You need to tend to him. It's no big deal. I feel
No,
bad.
it's okay. He'll be fine. Okay. Yeah, I'll start over.
No worries.
So yeah, I actually grew up in St. Louis and then I moved to Boulder in 2008 to go to CU Boulder. And,
Okay.
and that's kind of where I got my start doing music. Like sophomore year, I started dabbling in music production, and it was kind of like a really pivotal time in the Colorado music scene. It was like right when Grizz and Big Gigantic and Pretty Lights and STS9 were all like doing their thing. Like,
Okay.
so I was definitely heavily inspired by the scene that was going on in Colorado, and I never left. So I've been
Wow. So were
Denver.
you going to clubs and stuff when they were all coming up?
Yeah, yeah. I
Oh,
mean, they were already kind of like, you know,
at a certain level.
yeah, they were already like at Red Rocks,
Oh,
so I
damn.
didn't see like
Okay.
the actual come up.
But still, I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, it was a really cool time, and I moved to Denver shortly after that, and all those people have become my friends at this point. So
Yeah,
it's
you
pretty
toured
well.
and done stuff with all of those artists.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Wow.
was just like a baby at the time.
So you said you grew up in St. Louis. What was that like?
It was cool. I mean, I left like right before I was 21, so I didn't really like immerse myself into the nightlife scene, and I didn't really get a feel for what the music scene was like other than my brother was in a bunch of indie rock bands, so I was kind of like in that scene, but I never really saw the electronic world there, which is interesting. I think
Uh-huh.
that's why when I moved to Colorado, I was kind of like cracked wide open. I was just like, oh my God, like what is happening?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So your brother is your brother older or younger than you?
He's 3 years older. Yeah.
Okay. So you grew up like watching him playing bands and everything?
Yep. Yeah, he was in a
Okay.
bunch of bands. My dad was in a band in Hollywood back in the day, and
Oh, wow.
in a musical family, and I was like trying to find my way in, but I never stuck with an instrument. I just was always like heavily inspired by it, and I think
Mhm.
when I figured out that I could produce music without being classically trained in an instrument, I was like, all right, I have to give this a shot.
Yeah. Wow.
But
Okay. So
I thought it was
dad,
too late.
well, does anyone else do it professionally or just you now at this point?
Just me, yeah.
That's isn't that pretty wild? I mean, growing
Yeah.
up in a family of everyone else is doing it, and then you're the one that ends up taking it as like
Yeah.
a career path. So you said your dad was in band. What did he play?
He played guitar and sang.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and then my brother plays like every instrument, but he was drummer and guitarist primarily. And also,
Okay.
yeah.
So growing up, did you ever see your dad play, or did he have a band when you were growing up?
I didn't see like the band. It was
Oh,
called
okay.
Evening Stage. But I mean, yeah, he was always playing music around the house and jamming with his buddies, and yeah, so
That's cool. That's really cool. And you said you didn't really stick to an instrument. Where did your parents put you in like piano or guitar or anything like that when you were growing up?
Yeah, I took piano lessons and I also played cello in middle school. But I wasn't really into cello. I wish I stuck with piano like from an early age. I'm now like reintroducing myself, but I was kind of like more into sports and doing that kind of thing. And then I came around eventually.
Okay. And then what you said you went to college in Colorado. Is that what took you to Boulder?
Yeah, I went to CU Boulder. I was pre-journalism, so I was marketing and PR.
Okay.
And I did finish school, but it was took a you know took a lot more effort once I discovered music and that and that's what I wanted to do.
Sure.
Yeah, I moved to
Oh,
Denver away from Boulder because I was partying a little too much and
yeah,
do
Boulder's quite the school. I've heard a lot of people. I grew up in San Diego and I live
oh
in
nice.
Nashville now, but like a lot of people that I grew up with were going out there to go to college.
Yeah. Yeah, it was wild.
Yeah, it was like if you didn't get into San Diego State or it was like Boulder or like Arizona were the two
Yeah,
places that people would go to.
I
Those
heard
are
Arizona's pretty wild too.
yeah. Was the party aspect of it like a draw for you? Is that where you're like, oh, okay, that's a cool school?
Not necessarily. I'm a big snowboarder. So
Ah, okay.
that was a draw. And that's actually kind of part of what got me into the music scene was there was a lot of overlap between like the pro snowboarder skier scene and music and like parties and stuff. So a lot of actually some of the first two like producers that I met was this guy, Andrew Hathaway, who's a pro skier. And he kind of like opened my eyes a little bit to like or like kind of mentored me a little bit in the world of production.
Oh,
So
okay. That's
yeah.
cool. Yeah, I did. I grew up skateboarding and it was like also the kind of the hand in hand thing where a lot
Yeah.
of bands I listened to were because I'd watch this old like VHS skate tape and I'm like, who is
Right.
this? Oh, it's Iron Maiden. Okay, dope. I like this band or whatever it was. Like I was introduced to so much music just
Totally.
from the videos or watching skaters with like a shirt of like the Misfits or whoever it may be or Wu-Tang shirt. And you're like, who is
Yeah.
that? And then
You're like,
go
"Hey,
check them out. So that's
yeah, and I
cool.
mean,
Like,
especially in Colorado, it's like every winter I do like a mountain tour. And as a snowboarder, I would always like go to like the small venues in all the mountain towns, like in Breckenridge. I remember seeing Panty Raid and the Glitch Mob, and like, so I would like see these like intimate electronic shows while
mhm.
I was up for a weekend doing a snowboard thing. So it was definitely like very much intertwined and kind of
Yeah.
like threw me into that world.
That's awesome. Are you still snowboarding?
I am not as much as I would like to admit, but
Okay.
I'm making it a goal this year to like build that into my schedule because I really miss it. And obviously touring is intense, but you can't like not have do the things you love to do.
Sure. Yeah, because you got a lot of dates coming up at least.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna hit like 95 shows this year, which is more than
That's
I've ever
amazing.
done in a year. So it's been a lot, but I'm stoked and I feel like I finally have this like balance in my life, which really helps because that took a while to figure out in the touring world.
Yeah, for sure. So you
But
said you kind of you were going to these parties and kind of alongside snowboarding and um you met a pro skier that was also a producer and that is that what kind of got you interested in like wanting to learn how to DJ and how to produce music? Like what kind of was like, oh, I want to be able to do that. Like, do you remember that moment?
um that was kind of after I was already interested. I'd like met him and I was like, hey, like, can you show me some stuff? Or like
Oh, okay.
I was curious. Um, I actually got my brother Ableton software for Christmas one year, which
Mhm.
is the DAW that I use to write music.
Yeah.
And he gave me the demo and was just like, you should fuck around with this. So I just popped it in my computer, went to Guitar Center the next day and bought a little launchpad controller. And I just kind of like I was just really curious. I was hearing all of this music that I was really inspired by, and I wanted to know how it was made.
Hmm.
My brain wanted to like figure out how that happened.
Yeah.
So I was definitely a producer before I was a DJ. I
Okay.
started making music before I ever started like playing live or DJing other people's music.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, I think it was a lot of things. I mean, I just was going to a lot of shows, that serendipitous moment of giving my brother the software, and then literally just went down like a YouTube rabbit hole. It was like learned as much as I possibly could. So yeah,
Sure.
honestly, I credit YouTube for like most of what I know.
It's
It's
so
just
wild now that you could just go. Yeah, I know. Like when I was growing up, you had to go on like Ultimate Guitar Tab or something like that and try to figure out how to play. Now it's
yeah,
like go on YouTube and somebody will teach you how to pretty much do whatever you want to know. Like
yeah,
change a car battery, like whatever it may be. You're like, oh, how do I like build
totally.
this? And then just some guy in his backyard doing that.
Some
It's
guy.
like so crazy.
I mean, it's pretty wild. Yeah, it was like YouTube tutorials and literally just like trial and error, like not being afraid to like fuck up.
Yeah. And were you putting up your music like on SoundCloud or anything like that? Or like
Yeah, so I was in a duo project called Crooked Drivers.
okay.
Really stupid.
And
Can
how
edit
did you
that
meet
part
the other
out.
how did you meet the other half of Crooked Drivers?
It was actually an old partner of mine.
Okay.
And so that was a project that lasted about 5 years.
Oh wow. Okay.
So yeah, so that was like 2010 to 2016 or like something like that.
Mhm.
And then that's when I left that project to start the Maddy O'Neal project.
Okay.
So I've been in the game way longer than just this, but
Sure.
that was kind of the moment where it was like it felt right and everything kind of fell into place. And yeah.
Okay.
So
So you were
we
doing this for a long time. I mean, you're of 6 years of doing this and building that project.
yes, and then I kind of like started over. I mean, I had all the connections that I made and the relationships and the skills, obviously, but I started over as like a brand, which was terrifying and exciting at the same time. But
I bet, right? I
like
mean,
it
you
worked
left
out.
something that was already established, right? You've been working on it for 5 years, 6 years, and
Yeah,
then it's like, okay, I'm gonna start from like zero.
yeah, yeah. It was pretty scary, but I think sometimes the scariest things that you do yield the best results.
Uh-huh.
Um,
And
so
so was there like a moment when, or like what was kind of the first like validation, like, okay, I'm stoked that I went this way and started, just my own thing.
Um, I had so much support when I left that project because we were doing really well. It just wasn't a healthy situation for me.
Mhm.
Um, so we were kind of like on the come up, which was even harder to leave a situation
Right.
like that. But I had a lot of support. Like my now manager is Pretty Lights' manager.
Oh,
And
wow, that's huge.
he put me on Red Rocks as an opening slot for Pretty Lights before I even had a name.
Oh my
My
gosh.
new project, basically. Or before I had like a logo. He's like, you got to figure out your logo. Like, we're making the Red Rocks poster. So, like,
Oh, wow.
I had like a huge, huge amount of support. Like, Michael Menner um, called me up and was like, I'm not going to let you sit around and feel sorry for yourself. Like, I've been in your position. You're so talented. He's like, I'm going to put you on these shows. It was like 5 months from this conversation. And he's like, take this time to write an album. Cause I was like, I'm not going to play a show until I have this amount of original music so I can prove to people like what I'm trying to say
Mhm.
with this new project. So in that time between the shows that Michael put me on, my first shows, and the conversation that I'm talking about, I wrote my whole first record.
Oh my gosh.
It was like 10 tracks or something. So I had a lot of people like pushing me and like giving me opportunities so that I would have like things to look forward to, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. That's
Um,
awesome they have that
really
community of
cool.
people, yeah, that were supportive
Yeah.
of you, right? I mean, to
Yeah.
go and then write a whole album. So at that point, they just knew that you were talented. It was like, we're gonna put you on the show.
Yes.
You're like, okay, well, I need to like write some
Yeah.
songs. That must have been like so much pressure.
It was a lot of pressure. And like, honestly, looking back on that Red Rock show, like I was totally not ready. But, like that's how I've lived my career is like saying yes to things that you're not ready for
Mhm.
and meeting yourself there,
Mhm.
So
Was that hard to write that first album, or did you kind of already know what you wanted this project to sound like?
it was definitely, I mean, I'm trying to like remember even because that was like 6 years ago, but
Mhm.
I definitely it was freeing to me because I was like felt like I was like, I wonder what I sound like by myself. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I definitely had habits that carried over from my techniques and production, but yeah, I think it definitely was hard and scary. But and like I'm still figuring out my sound and my lane, it was just kind of like that first step in figuring that out, which was exciting and definitely felt good to and validating because I could write all of this music by myself. Because
Yeah.
to a certain extent, if you're in a duo, you're leaning on somebody else a little bit. But it was definitely validating to know that I could do
Yeah,
everything.
do it on your own. Yeah, I bet. Especially, yeah, if you're bouncing ideas off this other person and then it's like, okay,
Right.
now it's just me, and what do I want to sound like? Because it's probably you don't
Yeah,
want to write a sound like that other project, your
exactly.
new stuff. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna go in this direction. And
Yeah.
was there like, do you remember the first song or like writing your first one? You're like, okay, this I got it. This is what I'm gonna do.
Uh, yeah, I mean, there's definitely moments along the way that just clicked.
Yeah,
It's just those constant, it's such a roller coaster when you're like writing in general. You know,
sure.
some days you're like, I forget how to make music. Like, fuck. And some days you're like, I'm the best producer ever.
Right.
Uh, so there was just moments along the way that were validating, or I was like, okay, this feels like me. I'm gonna
Mhm.
keep doing that.
Love it.
So
And yeah, you've put out a bunch of what, 4 EPs, I believe, or so.
I
Another and then an
this one,
album last year or
yeah, I
early
put out
this
a full
year.
length LP. The full length LP last year will be the second one,
Mhm.
the one that I'm talking about. I did like my debut LP.
Yeah, that first one in like 2016 or whatever.
Yeah. And then I did my first follow up to that last year called Ricochet.
Mhm.
And then the EP that I put out 2 weeks ago, I think is my fifth EP.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. That
So
makes
yeah,
sense.
it was pretty ballsy to come straight out the gate with an LP.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah,
But I was
but I mean,
like,
you put that out there, right? You're like, I don't want to do a show unless I have enough this many
yeah,
songs. And then it was like, well, here's my first album.
yeah. I mean, it's wild because I see some producers just putting out their debut EP and they've been like killing it for a long time. So
Right.
I guess I just had a different, everyone has their own path, and I
Yeah.
wanted to like come out swinging.
Yeah, that's cool though. I think that's really, yeah, admirable to like be like, I'm not gonna do a single and then have people hope that they like the rest of it. It's just like, here's the whole album. Let's just do
Yeah,
it.
totally.
With obviously your business is a lot of in the EDM world is a lot of live music, right? A lot of live shows and clubs
Yeah.
and parties and stuff. I mean, when the pandemic happens, like at what point, like were you working on music? Were you getting ready for like a big tour? And then that just because you had put an album or an EP out in 2019, and then
Oh,
was
the
it like,
pandemic.
yeah, did that like kind of rip everything out from under you? Obviously, with
Um,
most of everybody, but were you um just because I know just so much of EDM and electronic music is like the atmosphere and the party and the
yeah.
the vibe.
Honestly, when that happened, I was
Mhm.
kind of burnt out on touring, and I
Uh,
was in an interesting place where I felt like I wasn't growing as a producer because I never had time, and I was really caught up in the party world at
okay.
that time. So I was like touring a ton, not getting a lot of sleep, and didn't have any time to like actually sit and produce and grow and feel like I was getting better. I felt like I
Mhm.
was kind of like going through the motions. So pandemic was kind of a blessing in disguise for me because I needed like to put a pause and like really reform my vision. I was not as productive as I had hoped I would be over the pandemic, but I like learned how to like active listen again
Mm.
And I did a lot of like searching and like really honing my DJ skills as well. That's kind of like when I fell in love with house music and started doing like the Madhouse sets.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of were born from that. So I definitely did a lot of exploration over the pandemic and like figuring out where I wanted to be and what those next steps were with like a clear head versus, you know, feeling like I was burnt out.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, I can see how that could easily happen. I mean, if you're getting tours and you're doing music, I mean, it would be something where you don't want to say no, like you said earlier, just say yes to everything and then kind of figure it out. It's like
Right,
if
right,
you say no, are you going to get another call, or is it like, oh, yeah, Maddie said no last time, so
right. And at
yeah.
the time I was like the money that I was making was like I was like surviving. So it
Mhm.
was hard to say no to shows because I was like
Yeah,
gotta pay my
there's my
bills.
paycheck, right?
Yeah. So I think it was a necessary pause for me. And I feel like the growth that I've had since the pandemic was because I had that time to like really focus on myself, figure out like what balance I needed to be able to be in a good headspace to be successful moving forward and like, just honing all of these things that I never had time to do.
Mhm. Do you feel like you like just was it just a lot of time screwing around on the computer, like with the programs and trying to figure out things like was there something that unlocked that you're like, oh wow, like this is, I'm gonna go I've discovered this certain thing that I hadn't used or wasn't, hip to at the time when I was in 2019 when I had done
Uh,
my last CP or whatever it may be. I don't know.
I think it was honestly, it was a bunch of different things. It was like, so my normal sets I play with Ableton.
Hmm.
And I use two drum pads versus like decks. I think once I started really DJing, I started thinking about my music differently. Whether that's like transitions or thinking about it in a live setting, or um, I just started listening to a lot more music.
Mm.
Because sometimes, you're around music all the time, you're making music. Sometimes you forget to like really actively listen. I think that was a big part of it. Um, And I mean, I'm just constantly learning. Like, if there's a new plugin that people are talking about, I always look it up. Most of the time, buy it. Try to like keep up with, the technology that's happening and like the sound design world. Um, I think that, yeah, there was definitely a bunch of factors, but I feel like I got inspired again, which is the
Yeah,
most important part, because if you're not feeling it and you're not stoked, you're probably not going to make your best music.
100%. With the you just released an EP, yeah, 2 weeks ago or so, not very
Yeah,
long ago.
I have tour brain, so I have no idea what day it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
you have shows like every weekend, it looks like coming up
Yeah.
I mean, through the end of the year.
Yeah, I
Doing
kind
a
of
lot.
coming home on like Monday, and then I usually have like Tuesday, Wednesday, and then I'm flying out on Thursdays.
Yeah.
So it is nice to come home for a couple days though, but it's
Then you're
like,
gone again. So like you'll be in New York like
yeah,
this
basically,
coming weekend, like in on Saturday.
yeah. I basically put my clothes in the washer, put them right back into the suitcase.
Oh my gosh. Um, I mean, yeah, that's a lot of touring coming.
Yeah.
And with the EP coming out, like, when did you start working on those songs that had just recently came out?
Those were, I don't even know, probably in like January,
Oh,
something.
okay.
Yeah. So these were like,
They're really new then. I mean, it's only October.
yeah, you're right. I don't really remember. I think honestly, I write a lot of music in the winter because that's when like I actually have like bigger chunks of time at home. So like
Hmm.
my bigger projects, the ones that are more cohesive outside of singles, I think I write a lot in the winter. Um, and I'm looking forward to January. I'm gonna take the month off and
Oh,
write music in January.
nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
deserved because like yeah, you started a couple weeks ago and all the way up through the 22nd. It's got stuff going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was like festival season straight into fall tour. So
Yeah,
yeah.
you got the chance to pretty much do all the big ones, right? All the big festivals.
I did a lot of my bucket list festivals this year. It was like Coachella, Bonnaroo, um, Torvin.
I mean, Coachella itself is like that's
Yeah,
like it's crazy how that became like the festival. I mean, it's awesome, but it's like
yeah.
to me, I
It's
remember when it started and like you could just like walk up and get a ticket. And it was only like
really,
1 or 2 days. Yeah. And it became 2 days, and it was a whole 3 days, and it was 2 weekends in a row. I was like, oh my God, this is
yeah.
wild. But
That was pretty cool.
yeah, was that that must have been an insane experience playing Coachella.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just glad that like the Do Lab exists and that they're like paying attention to underground up and coming artists.
Hmm.
It's a pretty cool space to be involved in, like at the same time that you're watching like superstar acts, you know?
Yeah.
Uh yeah, it was pretty cool. I had a funny story. It was kind of stressful getting into Coachella. I didn't realize how insane it was. Like
You park like
I
10
almost
miles
missed my
away.
own set.
Oh my
I
gosh.
literally I literally walked up with 10 minutes to spare.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was really stressful. But
Yeah.
I had a show in Boulder the night before. It was like
Hmm.
a 420 show.
There you
And
go.
that came through like way after I had that book. So I was like, okay, so I have to fly out the morning of, which I would normally not do for
Uh-huh.
6 o'clock set.
Yeah,
So
like the biggest
something
festival on
like
the
that. Yeah.
planet.
Yeah. So I flew into like John Wayne and there was just like so much traffic getting down there. And then I couldn't even get to like the gate to get in because there was just red traffic everywhere. Like I almost walked. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh
it
my
was
gosh.
a
Even
lesson
when you
learned.
park there, it's like literally 10 miles. Like you're just parked
Yeah.
and you just walk, and there's so many of these like buzzer things where you have to like hit your wristband on it. It's like there's no
Oh
way to
yeah.
really run in there. There's like 50 of them.
Yeah.
Like, oh my
Nobody should get
gosh.
into that. That's for sure.
It's like so much security. But that's
Yeah.
awesome that you got the chance to do that.
Yeah. And then I
And
my set.
yeah, you made it to it though.
Yes.
The Dulab's that cool like box building, right?
It's
It's
like
like
it's outside. It has like
yeah,
the I forget what they're called, like the triangle tapestry kind of
yeah.
yeah.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, you got the tour coming up. Are you playing any cities you haven't done yet? Or pretty much a
Um
bunch of
I
venues
am
you've already been to?
actually. I haven't done Santa Fe. I haven't done the Santa Fe Meow Wolf,
Okay.
which I heard is like the coolest one. It's like the original Meow Wolf. Um, doing Columbia, Missouri, which is not far from where I grew up, but
That's cool.
like all of my most of my high school friends went to Mizzou. I mean,
Oh, wow.
a lot of them don't live that they left. So like I'll
Right.
get the next generation. But it'll be cool to go play there. And most of the other ones are kind of cities that I've been to
Mhm.
time and time again. It's just cool to be able to do my own shows there finally.
Yeah, you're a headliner, right?
Yeah, because I've
Versus like
done
going with a bunch of other artists, so to
right.
speak.
Yeah, like I think I've played San Francisco like at least 6 or 7 times, but it's never been my own show. And I get to go back and do co-headline with Minnesota for Pretty Lights After Party, you know. So it's
Right.
a lot of like, okay, cool, I'm finally at this point
Yeah,
moments, which is
validating for sure.
yeah, yeah,
Amazing. Well, Maddie, thank you so much for taking time today to chat with
yeah,
me. I appreciate it.
yeah. It's very
Um,
me too.
yeah, I have one more quick question. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Um, I would say you can't do it alone. Uh, immerse yourself in the community that you're in or that's closest to you or a community. There's plenty of people online talking about production and, you know, creating little support groups together. And I think that was huge for me is having a support system and people that you can lean on and learn from. And the music community that you're building, I think is a big part of, it's a big part of why I do what I do. So like seeing what's going on and like the ripple effect of what's happening, I think is pretty cool.
Bringing it back.